Political expert warns California could secede in the next 10 years, sparking a new civil war. Political economist Benjamin Cohen warned that the risk of political polarization in America is reaching a breaking point, and it's substantially greater than zero. And not just that, my friends, we have more and more stories. Could America break apart? Democrat issues civil war warning. Trump calls for civil war. What's the next one? Mother Jones. Will Trump's disinformation lead to a civil war? And on and on and on. Heavens me. Why are so many people making the argument that we're headed for a civil war? Perhaps it could be mass deportations, expansion of ICE, and professors repeatedly giving this warning. Former CIA analyst Barbara F. Walters saying the U.S. is on track for a civil war. Journalist Stephen Marsh writing several books about it. Actually has a book called The Last Election that he wrote with Andrew Yang. And one of the characters is me. I'm sure he doesn't treat me fairly or nicely in his book and accuses me of whatever. But regardless, we've had the guy on several times. We've interviewed him, and he certainly believes we're on track for a civil war, though he blames the right. My friends, with all the talk of immigration, this is one of the predictors that we had in the past couple of years as to what could be the catalyst. Abortion was one of them, but I don't know that abortion makes the cut. Perhaps. But right now, it looks like immigration. The story of immigration right now is tracking similarly in some ways to that of slavery in the first Civil War. Now, obviously, there's a big difference. People brought here against their will and forced to work is very different from people breaking in. But there's an argument over the rights of humans that creates some similarities. Again, I know they're overwhelmingly different, but there is a tiny overlap in some areas, as, look, everything overlaps in some way. What we have now is illegal immigrants who are inflating the vote count for states like California, electoral college and congressional vote count, changing the shape of this country in ways the American people do not want. Sooner or later, these blue states must be brought to heel. And if they resist, civil war. We've already seen the makings of. Now, maybe they don't. We don't know for sure, but it's possible. Now, before we read this story, my friends, we got a big announcement. Make sure you go to dccomedyloft.com and pick up your Culture War live podcast tickets. July 26th, August 2nd, August 9th, the upcoming dates. July 26th, we got some big names lined up. They're not confirmed, so I can't confirm that just yet, though we really need to get on it because it's coming up. August 2nd, Michael Malice, Angry Cops, having that cop debate. It's going to be amazing, and it's probably going to be the funniest show we've ever done because both these guys are fantastic, extremely funny. But, Michael Malice, very critical of police, and Angry Cops, quite literally a cop. That'll be at the DC Comedy Loft. So go to dccomedyloft.com, check the events, and pick up your tickets to the Culture War Live now. They will sell out. I guarantee it. Also, we have tickets. We have 30 seats for each show, free for members at timcast.com. First come, first serve. So go to timcast.com, join our Discord server, hang out with like-minded people, and we reserve seats just for you guys. Plus, after parties are in the works, brought to you by the Discord members, and we will be sponsoring and helping get all that set up. But let's jump to the story from the Post-Millennial. Political expert warns California could secede in the next 10 years, sparking a new civil war. Interesting. What's this all about? A professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara, has issued a warning that California could attempt to secede from the United States within the next decade, potentially sparking a broader civil war across the country. Political economist Benjamin Cohen, who authored 20 books, said in a recent analysis that the risk of polarization in America reaching a breaking point is substantially greater than zero. Now, I want to give a shout out to his name. It's Ben Cohen, the same as the Ben and Jerry's guy. It's probably a common name, I guess. Cohen outlined a scenario in which California declares independence by 2035 due to escalating tensions between the state and the federal government, which he said could provoke a dramatic response from Washington. In a mock news bulletin of this hypothetical scenario, Cohen imagined a future where President J.D. Vance has threatened a military takeover of state government in Sacramento, backed by National Guard troops from nearby red states. Armed conflict looks increasingly possible. Well, we've got it for you, my friends. This is from news.ucsb.edu. Could America break apart? Expert explores the possibility. In a new book, political economist Benjamin Cohen considers the forces driving nations, including the U.S., towards fragmentation. But full stop, my friends. What about this? From theweek.com. This is a report from 2020. U.S. election 2020, Washington insiders preparing for counting chaos and states seceding. Experts conduct wargaming exercise amid fears of major political upheaval following November vote. Let me just grab this for you. The Shadow Campaign, time.com. I want to show you these two stories. Many of you are familiar with them, but for those that are not, because it's been several years, I want to make sure you see this. Time magazine wrote, "The secret history of the Shadow Campaign that saved the 2020 election." Saved it? Well, it's supposed to be a democracy, right? In which case, you can never save an election. Just politically, one side wins or doesn't win. But the argument is that between the two sides, we're all America, right? No. They saved it. And what do they describe it as? A conspiracy. They say, quote, "There was a conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes, one that both curtailed the protests and coordinated the resistance from CEOs. Both surprises were the result of an informal alliance between left-wing activists and business titans. The pact was formalized in a terse, little-notice joint statement of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, that is, the government, and AFL-CIO published on Election Day. Both sides would come to see it as a sort of implicit bargain inspired by the summer's massive, sometimes destructive racial justice protests, in which the forces of labor came together with the forces of capital to keep the peace and oppose Trump's assault on democracy." That is how Time magazine described it. In this period, several Democrats and neocons got together to have a war game. What would happen if Trump refused to lose? They claimed he did. Well, let me just skip all the hubbub and pull it up. In the ensuing chaos, California, Oregon, and Washington state said they would secede from the U.S. if Mr. Trump was sworn in. The Democratic-controlled House of Reps asserted that Mr. Biden was the true president. The Republican-controlled Senate said it was Mr. Trump. Now, that didn't happen. But there were some elements. People claimed the election was rigged. There were deep challenges. And the Capitol Police hunted down many innocent Trump supporters and falsely charged them with crimes. Now, I know the Democrats are going to say, on January 6th, the violent rioters. Okay, I'm going to say it again, as I always do. The violent rioters of Jan 6 deserved prison. Trump pardoned them. Yeah, I think 3 years is enough for a riot. I mean, come on. Some people got 20 years. It's ridiculous. I think 3 years is enough. These Antifa guys that are smashing windows and starting fires, I think 3 years is enough as well. Granted, anyone who actually had a plot to overthrow the government, which they didn't, deserves prison time. But they went overboard with it. And the result was extreme violence. Now, this guy's making the argument California may try to secede. Here's what they write. Benjamin Cohen begins his new book, quote, "After years of festering discontent with the direction of politics in Washington, California today formally declared its independence as a sovereign nation. President Vance has threatened a military takeover of state government in Sacramento, backed by National Guard troops from nearby red states. Armed conflict looks increasingly possible. A provocative scenario, all the more plausible coming at a time when California's governor is furious at the president for ordering troops into the state to keep order at immigration protests. Riots, by the way. But for all our partisan acrimony and political polarization, America isn't really headed towards a second civil war, right? I wish that I could be sanguine about it, said distinguished Professor Emeritus Cohen, who spent 30 years as the Lewis G. Lancaster Professor of International Political Economy in the Political Science Department at Santa Barbara. I'm not. It seems to me we cannot ignore the risks of the current fissures and fragmentation that break down a sense of community. Given that today's political divide is more between urban and rural as opposed to north versus south and east versus west, it's difficult for me to imagine how things would divide up if there was a civil war. But the probability of such a war is substantially greater than zero. Cohen's views on the subject are extremely well informed. His new book, Dream States, A Lurking Nightmare for the World Order, is a comprehensive guide to secession movements currently active all around the world. He provides an assessment of the risk of these efforts leading to violence and offers a possible path of diffusing tensions. I consider secession a grievously underappreciated phenomenon. My motivation to write this book was to call people's attention to the fact We tend to simplify geography by looking exclusively at the existing lines in a map that separate one sovereign state from another. But the reality is there are many people within those states that are very unhappy with the arrangement. They'd prefer to draw the lines in a different way. In some cases, they'd prepared to fight to redraw those lines. The war in Ukraine provides a vivid example. The conflict over whether it should be an independent nation or a facet of Greater Russia goes back hundreds of years. It's not going to end with the current conflict. It's similar to the relationship between Quebec and Canada. Quebec is a distinct community with a different language, which has periodically challenged its incorporation to the larger state. The same is true of Ukraine. The majority of Ukrainians believe they have a right to a state of their own. Putin and his people take quite a different view. And I love these deranged, evil psychopaths. The situation in Ukraine really irks me because these people so desperately want you to think it's literally just Putin. Ukraine fought for Crimea fought for independence in the early 90s, and the greater Ukraine crushed their fight for sovereignty. It is not as simple to say it's Putin versus the Ukrainians. There are many conflicts budding. The eastern regions, the Donbass region, these are more Russian-speaking people. They're close to Russia, and there are arguments over where the border should be drawn. And it is a conflict for which I think the U.S. has no reason to be involved with. But notice how these people write it, these American imperialists. The difference between these two situations, of course, is that Canada has found a way to keep Quebec in the fold, primarily through allowing the province to have considerable sovereignty under its own affairs. He goes on to say, it's simply not happening in the most troubled spots, in most potential trouble spots. The most dangerous of these is Taiwan. We get it. But as Cohen notes, much of the human decision-making is driven by forces other than logic. In the case of secessionist movements, he documents in dream states the primary driver is usually a sense of identity, the impulse to rally behind the group you feel you belong to, and the insistence on its right to act independently. Identity can be a very powerful motivator, he said. That's why I worry about the risk of civil war. When it comes to something as strong as a sense of community identity, rationalism falls by the wayside. Agreed. Here we go from March. Democrat issues civil war warning. Maxine Waters said that President Trump is working towards a civil war. Quote, I'm worried that Trump is on the edge of creating a civil war. He alluded to it more than once. He alluded to the fact that if he did not get reelected, that there could be a civil war. And there still may be. From Los Angeles Press.org, which I'm not familiar with, but they do have this and it is prominent on Google. Quote, the second civil war Trump wants. Trump is not celebrating the U.S. military. He's recruiting it for a personal regime. His speech at Fort Bragg was an open call for a second civil war. Indeed, it wasn't. But let me break it down for you, how they view things and how we and I view things. There's an America that I remember. I'd wake up, and this is the early 90s, 91 maybe, 92. Oh, no, this would have to have been 93 or 94. How old? I would have been, I was 4 in 1990. So actually probably 95. Got my years way wrong. I was probably 7 or 8. So it's around that time. You get it. And I walked outside of my house, walked only a few blocks to the local park where there were 4 baseball games happening at once. Kind of weird. How do you play? I mean, the fields were far apart from each other, but the ball could roll into the other part of the outfield for the other field. But, that's what happened. And I sold Kool-Aid. Got a little pitcher you could pump. My dad gave me some Kool-Aid materials. Said, you're going to owe me I'm going to loan this to you. Go sell Kool-Aid, but you got to pay me back for the Kool-Aid. So me and my brother went to the park where they were playing baseball, and we asked if anybody wanted to buy Kool-Aid from us. That was the America I grew up in. The great American pastime. Well, as I mentioned in a previous segment, I went home today, and those baseball fields are overgrown with weeds. Nobody plays anymore. No one's there. It's not just an issue of immigration per se. It's that our culture is dying. People are going online, they're on phones, they're swiping, and parents aren't maintaining this. It's just as much my fault as it is yours or literally anybody else's. To be fair, some are more responsible than others. Some people had families bring their kids to ball games and try and maintain that American tradition. And I'm not saying baseball is the only thing. Football's fine too. We have sports and we have pastimes. There were things that Americans did for a while, but times do change too. That's fine. But now here's the country that I see. The people that made America and who gifted that inheritance to their children, this includes immigrants. those who came here legally. We all worked to build a country with an agreement and a handshake. Now that agreement is being destroyed. This article right here says that Donald Trump is declaring a civil war. Why? Well, I look at New York with Zohran Mamdani, who Trump threatened to arrest, and I think he should. Should Zohran Mamdani obstruct ICE? That would be sedition, in my view. Zohran Mamdani said he will protect the families, the people from Trump's immigration enforcement. This is I Am Legend, like the graphic novel. What's happened is Americans are being replaced, and that's of all races. That is the hardworking Hispanic American who came here legally, whose family came here legally generations ago, the Native American, the Black American, those who were all a contributor to the building of this nation. There are now people coming here en masse to the tune of 20 million who care not for our traditions, our laws, our baseball fields. They just want to make money and live a better life. Now, I can certainly respect that, but they are not carriers of the American tradition, much like all of the people here. And I would also make the argument, the descendants of slaves have an entitlement to this nation for which they contributed that is being taken from them as well. In Chicago with the migration crisis, it was the Black community that said we were being, quote, we are being replaced. Now, it's shocking for all of the far left that want to claim it's white supremacy. No. Here's what I see in this country. There are those of us that believe in the American promise, the American tradition, and what our ancestors built. Now you have Zohran Mamdani, a migrant, legal, who is advocating for illegal immigrants to be protected. He says he will do what he can to stop ICE, our law enforcement. The way the left is framing this, they, along with their illegal immigrant friends, they're saying it's our country now, and we will not let you stop us. Then there are those that believe in the American tradition saying you have broken into our country and have usurped our traditions, and you cannot stay. I believe this is a fight for the soul of America, and Donald Trump must deport these people. He stands firmly on American tradition. These people who write this article saying that Trump is calling for a civil war, it's not a civil war. There is an invasive force that has come here without resistance. And Trump is saying, no, you can't be here. You have to go. And these are the two factions. Of course, they feel that they're right. They come here and they say it's our country now. But they are not legal. They came here illegally. They violated our laws. The argument is, the land belongs to only those with the power and will to control it. Well, Trump certainly has that will. They write. And this is from last month, mind you. Earlier this week, Donald Trump called for a second civil war at a U.S. military base. He didn't, but you see what they're saying. The scenario can be resisted and prevented if we have the courage to listen, interpret, and act. And this Saturday, we will have chosen to act. The speech was given at the base now known as Fort Bragg. The fort was named for a Confederate general. It was renamed Fort Liberty. Under this administration, it was renamed Fort Bragg. You see? There are those that would maintain the traditions, the good and the bad. A Confederate general indeed, Bragg. But the reason we name things after Confederate generals is not because we celebrate the Confederacy. No, we crushed it. It's to celebrate the reunification of the Union and the recognition that we are all now Americans, even those who were defeated. The statues of the Confederacy, to some, honor the legacy of the Confederacy. To others, are a reminder of the Civil War and the lives lost. Understand this when I bring this up. I'm pulling this up. The lies they claim. Here we go. The lies they claim. From the AP. Protester involved in pulling down abolitionist statue in Wisconsin gets 6 months in jail. Story from 23. In 2020, a Union Civil War abolitionist hero named Hans Christian Heg, his statue was toppled and beheaded by these protesters. Now, hold on there a gosh darn minute. I thought this guy was writing some anger about Fort Bragg. They are liars, they are invaders, and they seek to destroy our country. I am proud of this nation and Abraham Lincoln and the defeat of the Union. I also recognize Sherman was a monster. His march to the sea, killing civilians and razing farmland, destroying railroads. The war was brutal. It was awful. But the Confederacy was wrong. Now, some argue they were right. I'd argue otherwise. I also recognize the Union did horrible things. Suspension of habeas corpus, the arrest of the Maryland legislature, not all of them, most of them. There were terrible things in that war. And that is our history and tradition, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We say away with the bad and forever with the good. And that means we always seek to be better. Now, this man says they renamed it Fort Bragg, the Confederacy. That's a lie to manipulate liberals. During the George Floyd riots, they beheaded and destroyed Hans Christian Heg. They tore down and destroyed a statue of Frederick Douglass. They took down George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Christopher Columbus. It is not about the Confederacy or the left and the right. It is about the history of this nation versus those that would usurp it and destroy it. So when Trump says our names, our history, it will be restored, they say he's calling for civil war. No, the reality is, in 2020, they were tearing down statues and changing names because that is how you destroy a people and you destroy a nation. And they did it with little resistance. But the resistance is now here to save and preserve this union. And that is what Trump is doing, rather imperfectly, but it's certainly what he aims to do. It is what it is. This is why they say he's calling for a civil war. Will Trump's disinformation presidency lead to a civil war? They seek to burn this country to the ground, to reshape what it means to be American. There is an American tradition. They don't want it. Here's this. Is America headed for another civil war? From STL News, July 6th. They say, a profound sense of unease pervades conversations across the country, from bustling urban centers to quiet rural communities. Headlines frequently decry unprecedented levels of political division, civil unrest, and seemingly irreconcilable differences. A stark question hangs in the air. Are we headed for a civil war? They say, blah, blah, blah. Today's polarization goes beyond typical partisan squabbles. Ideological sorting, effective polarization, echo chambers, gerrymandering. They're going to say, so with these deep divisions, is a conventional civil war on the horizon? Most political scientists and historians specializing in civil conflicts around the world believe a traditional 1860-style civil war is highly improbable for a developed nation. However, dismissing the possibility of any conflict would be naive. Dr. Barbara F. Walter, a prominent political scientist who has extensively studied civil wars globally, has notably warned the nation exhibits several key indicators found in countries on the path to political violence. Increase in political violence. Yep. Sustained instability and anarchy. They say, rather than a neat division into warring factions, a more likely scenario might involve a widespread civil unrest, localized conflicts, and a breakdown of social order in specific areas, where grievances fester and are expressed through violence. Erosion of democratic norms. This encompasses a decline in trust in institutions, a disregard for election results, and willingness by political actors to undermine democratic processes for partisan gain. This anocracy, a state combining democratic and autocratic features, is identified by Walter as a particularly vulnerable space. For example, when Democrats arrested Trump's lawyers, I'm going to say it again because this is one of the most shockingly egregious things we've ever seen. Trump's lawyers were arrested for simply providing legal services, accused of being part of a conspiracy. Okay. It's right in your face. Now, I don't know if that means war. They say for citizens across the nation, this means engaging in civil discourse, seeking out diverse news sources, a way to navigate turbulent waters. While a full-blown civil war may not be knocking on America's door, the current trajectory is undeniably concerning. The path forward requires a renewed commitment to democratic principles, a willingness to bridge divides, and a recognition that the nation's strength ultimately rests on a diverse populace's ability to coexist and work towards a common future. The lessons of history are clear. Ignoring the warning signs comes at a perilous cost. I think it's wonderfully naive to think that you're going to bring leftists who want open borders and who are too stupid to actually know what's happening in this country to the table to negotiate honestly. I just don't see that as a reality. Here's a mirrorsafety.com. What would a second American Civil War look like? I've cited this before. But it's actually quite a long read. But they mention, interestingly, what a second civil war would look like. Let's just jump right to it. Section 3. Hot spots and conflict regions. If a second civil war were to break out, certain parts of the country would see more conflict than others. They mention the Mason-Dixon line might not be as clear-cut this time, but the ideological contracts are just as strong. Cities tend to be more liberal, while rural areas tend to be conservative. This could lead to urban centers clashing with the surrounding rural areas. The violence in the streets becoming common occurrences, a civil war could see urban governments trying to maintain control, while rural militias mobilize against them. We saw this in the American Civil War. I'm sorry, the American Revolutionary War. Lexington and Concord. The regulars quickly occupied Boston. They owned it. But the rural areas are where the fighting started. When people say it's unprecedented, they're wrong. It's most civil wars have this divide. There are some cities that will quickly be conquered by conservative right-leaning forces. These are going to be in red states. Blue states with strong state governments will quickly start to suppress the rural areas. So it will be somewhat state by state. Some states will be forced to join and others will be forced to join others. Famously, Texas in the American Civil War. Largely, the reason their leaders wrote they joined the Confederacy was proximity. Texas had barely been a state in the Union. They were part of Mexico. There was the whole independence thing. They joined the U.S. And when the Civil War started, they said, what are we going to do? Stay in the Union but be isolated and cut off from all the other states? That made no sense. So Texas said, it just makes sense. We're part of the Confederacy. Surprisingly, that's where slavery finally technically ended in the United States. Although, to be serious, the 13th Amendment actually ratified slavery. My friends, I don't know what will happen. We have this interesting article, which is recent, from just this week, charting multidimensional ideological polarization. And they have this image, which is fascinating. This image is not Democrat and Republican. This image does use red and blue, but actually does not identify opinion. You can see here A. Figure 1A is Democrat and Republican. What it's showing is the clusters of ideological homogeneity between the groups. As you can see, opinions, while not defined for Republicans, are clustered. There's a small center, very small, and then a large blue. And you can see where the dark blue clusters. This makes perfect sense. Democrats actually are less unified. You've got the far left and the more moderate Democrats disagreeing. As we can see in this chart, Democrats and Republicans are hyperpolarized, but Democrats are actually at odds with themselves. On the to figure B, you can see black and white. Even in the same section, notice it's the same shape. The area that is largely Democrat holds different political views to the black. White liberals hold different views to black liberals. And just this is not based on like if you overlaid all of these different colors, it'd be impossible to see things. But the point is, we can see where Democrats are and how they differ in their political views. You can see here the Republican area is dark red. And then over here, liberals, they don't necessarily completely agree, but they actually do agree more as white people than they do with black people. What I would make the guess on is that the bottom cluster that is blue here for black, these are likely the woke left, but we don't actually know. The point is, you can see low income, high income. You can see that low income people tend to be Democrats aligning with the left as well as black voters. The point is hyperpolarization. It's here, my friends. Whether or not we get a civil war in 10 years, I honestly have no idea. But the ingredients are in the pot. The tinder is below, and the spark could come at any moment. We don't know. We never do. There have been periods of civil strife that have not ended in civil war. In fact, there have been many of them. So maybe it's a lot of nothing. Or maybe it'll be crazy. So my friends, smash that like button, share the show with everyone. You know, there certainly is a lot more to talk about this. And we'll have the conversation later tonight at Timcast IRL. So make sure y'all share the show with everybody. Go back to Timcast IRL. Tonight at 8 p.m., make sure to come hang out for Timcast IRL, where we will be discussing all of these issues as well as some of the latest developments, of course, as we always do. Let me try and grab some of your Rumble rants while we're here. Fire Hazard says the no Epstein client list could spin. The media and FBI are corrupt. Tell the public we found nothing. Behind the scenes, Cash and Dan are making a case against FBI agents that helped cover the list. I don't know that I believe it. Sure. Rain says, does everyone losing their mind over the Epstein files realize they are blindly believing an Axios article about a leaked, unsigned memo? That's a very, very good point. Very good point. This leaked memo, some have argued, is fake. So we'll see. Pinochet says, why are we pretending that if it were a civil war scenario, Democrats like those disarmed in Massachusetts would not all be blanketly blamed and collectively punished? You know, my friends, I don't know for sure what exactly happens. We can try and predict all we want. But what I will say is our good friend Russell Brand is gearing up to go live, so we will begin that raid. Thank you all so much for, no guests today. We're coming back from the holidays, and a lot of people don't want to work. It's Monday after the 4th of July. Maybe they're traveling. I can respect it. I hope you had a great America's birthday. I certainly did. I'm going to send you on your way to hang out with our friend Russell Brand. So smash that like button. Share the show with everyone you know. Thank you all so much. Make sure you go to dccomedyloft.com. Come to our events, man. It's going to be nuts. They got something like 200 seats. These are big venues. We're going to sell out for sure. Because it is in a big metro area. I think we've already, we're close to it. So pick up your tickets now before it's too late. I know we're looking at a month and a half out for some of these shows, but the 26th is fast approaching. And you're going to be there. And you know what we do? We bring you up onto the stage to join the debate. And we're going to have members of the public just coming up, and who knows what they're going to say. That's why these are pre-tapings, because some people might say something real crazy. But hey, it'll be fun. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Come hang out tonight at 8 p.m. for Timcast IRL, and we'll see you all then.